Hello, Zoe and Laura.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
We good?
Good. So, this is episode 1 of You're Better Than That. And for our listeners, Zoe and Laura work with me. They're also my friends, and they are here to help extricate from me the stories and the ideas, and to represent you guys and ask questions, and to help the podcast flow and give me something to kind of riff off.
Yeah. So, Han, I know that episode 1, you wanted it to be based off of a workshop that you recently took. So do you want to give some context to what the workshop was about, and then we can flow into
Sure. So I've recently done a workshop where I was guiding some people into like a review and reflection process. And we were looking actually back over the previous year, and we were taking some time to actually do that properly. Actually, first point, just to say, it's really important to do review and reflection well. I am a 100 miles an hour person, which means that my nature is not to do that. And so one of the things that's really good about attending a workshop or doing it with others is it kind of makes you do something that you might never find the time to do.
It keeps you accountable as
It does. It does, because it's so easy to go, oh yeah, I've thought about that, and you literally did it for 2 minutes and you didn't ask yourself any deep questions or meaningful questions. So I think one of the best things about like coaching spaces or co-coaching spaces or accountability groups is it makes you do something that you might never get around to doing. So first thing to say before we even get into it is that actually just stopping and reflecting periodically is really important. Actually, another thought on that is that some people find that when they're doing like a review of the year time, that they can't remember the year. They can't remember what they've done. I mean, you can get your camera roll out, you can get your calendar out, but maybe there's something to be said about reviewing and reflecting more often than that.
Sure.
Maybe monthly, like look back over the month and review and think about what's gone really well, think about what hasn't gone really well. And this year we've done better, haven't we? Because every 3 months we've done that. So I was reflecting, when reflecting on the reflecting workshop, that I thought that I'd reviewed better this year and that we'd reviewed better because we'd taken the time to do it like every 3 months and to remind ourselves of all the brilliant things we've done.
Yeah.
It can get so easy. It's so easy to just think of all the things that didn't work out as you thought. And like life is quite disheartening at times and disappointing and maybe not what you thought it was going to be. And I think when we stop and go, well, this happened, you go, oh yeah. And we did that, and we decorated the lounge, and we, I don't know, did a triathlon. I didn't, but you know, you might have done. And you remind yourself of things that you've done that you may forget to actually celebrate.
I think as well, I know this is a pre-point, but what stuck out to me is that you said we've taken time to reflect.
Yeah.
And that's a major point, I think, that you can maybe speak more to. Actually, we all live busy lives, but carving that space and time for reflection, which is so important.
I think so, because I actually think you then plan better by doing it. Yeah. So some of the questions you've asked me as we've been reflecting have made us think, haven't they, about so what does that mean for the next 3 months? Because that happened, or look at this trend, or look at this great thing that happened. How do we use that to make really good decisions? Or what needs to be different? What's not working? And what do we need to address? But if you don't take the time to reflect and review, you're just simply never going to have that space to think like that. So on a personal level, I think celebrating even micro wins in the midst of tough stuff. I mean, loads of people out there are having a really hard time. We all are in different parts of our life. I think there's so many like aspects to life. You've got your family, you've got your friends, you've got your faith. If you have a faith, you've got your work, you've got love relationships, you've got extended family, chores, like, I don't know, there's a million things. There aren't many people out there where every single one of those levers is going well. So you might have, like, Laura, you've got some great things going on and some really tough things going on, and I would say I've got the same. So if you don't stop and celebrate the good bits, you're just going to be overwhelmed by all the stuff that's overshadowing.
Right.
And you've got to stop and go, actually, that was really good. That little thing was really fun. I've got to do more of that. So I kind of think the whole idea around reviewing and reflecting is really important, and also to remind us when tough things are going on, what else is really good. So that's kind of a pre-point. I know that isn't even about letting go,
It's good,
but I think it's important.
And then in your reflection of this workshop, what was the thing that you pulled out that made you think, I want to talk about this on the podcast?
Yeah, so one of the things that, again, that came with this review and reflection was I wrote down some of the really good stuff, which we've just talked about, and the things I'm really pleased about. But one of the questions that we did in this workshop was, what have been the 5 overriding emotions of this last period of time? And some of the emotions I wrote down were really positive ones, and some of them not so. I wrote down overwhelm. I don't think that's an emotion, but I wrote it anyway. And I also wrote down like disheartened or disappointment. I can't remember, something like that. And so if I'm going to recognise that some of my emotions have been painful over the last month or 3 months or year or whatever process time you're looking at, I've got to do something about this. So first of all, it's being honest. But the thing that stood out to me was you've then got to let go.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to take all of that into the next bit, whether that's a new year, a new month, a new week, a new day, whatever. You've got to let it go.
Yeah.
And letting go, I felt, had a couple of aspects to it. So I think the first thing is just owning it and being honest. So sometimes we can be in, I don't know whether people listening feel like this, but sometimes we can be in cultures or environments where we've just got to say everything's great and everything's fine. And, you know, you can only be in our group if you're willing to be happy and positive, but that's not reality. So I think the first thing we've got to do is be honest that life can have a dual track of this is amazing and this was flipping hard going on
and both things
at the same time. At the same time, they can be true. Totally. So I think owning that stuff and acknowledging what's been painful is the first thing. If you don't do that, how can you let it go? And then I think alongside that, there is the question of, what do I need to forgive myself for and what do I need to forgive others for? Or it may not even be something that feels like a sense of forgiveness of a person, but actually what do I need to let go of and forgive the circumstance? So if somebody's hurt you, there's a process of letting that go. If you haven't been or shown up in a way you wanted to, you've got to forgive yourself. And if a circumstance isn't as you thought it was going to be, you've also got to kind of forgive that and let it be as it is. And so forgiveness is a massive topic we could probably talk about 100 times over, and I'm sure we will. But I do think this idea of forgiving myself was quite important, that I know some things that I'd hoped for or hoped I'd be, I haven't been. But I now have to kind of own it, acknowledge it, and forgive myself for that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't show up better or do better. And then I kind of think alongside that, there is also an element in letting go of gratitude. As in order to let go, we need to have gratitude, not letting go of gratitude. I didn't mean that. We need to continue to be grateful. So I just stopped and thought about, actually, okay, what have I got to be so grateful for? And unbelievable things I've got to be grateful for. I got to do this last year. I got to, my lungs work, my arms and legs work, I have a home to live in, I have safety, I have security, I have wonderful opportunities, I have fantastic friends. There are loads of things that have been challenging, but there is so many things like on the micro to be grateful for and the macro to be grateful for. You know, just, I was with my friend the other day in the park and we were walking our dogs, and it was one of those like really pink mornings, you know, when the sun's coming up, it's pink and lovely. And we just I grabbed her arm and I said, just stop, look at that. And we just stopped walking and we just took it in for a minute. And we're like, oh, we get to look at this. I'm so grateful. So I think that wherever you're at, whether this is like the cusp of a year, cusp of a month, cusp of a week, that letting go of anything that's hindering, that's disappointing or disheartening involves owning it. I think it involves forgiveness of self or others or of a situation, and gratitude. And then when you've done that, you can kind of go, right, so what's going to be different? How am I going to show up different? How does this look different? I'm not sure you can do that well if you are still holding the baggage. I'm not sure how you can.
I was going to ask, Hannah, what would you say if a listener was in a situation or feeling a sort of way of, but Hannah, how can I let go? Or I've tried to let go and I just can't, or I keep picking it back up again, or this situation is continuous. I can't you know, I can't escape it. It is the situation I'm living in.
Yeah, it
what would you
hasn't
say
gone
to
away.
somebody like that?
I would say that's a really good question, because loads of people listening and myself will have ongoing things that there's no necessary change on the horizon. It may be outside of your control for there to be change, either through somebody else's behaviour, a situation, illness, all kinds of things could be outside of our control. And I think that's probably part of the solution, is recognising what's in my control and what's not. I come back to that a lot, like on the daily. What is in my control? Where does it sit? Does it sit in the sphere of my absolute control, i.e. me? Is it something I can influence, i.e. my family, my friends, a few select others maybe? Or is it outside of both of those areas? Or is it a circumstance that is not kind of a thing I can fix? That's a really helpful categorisation that you may almost have to put it back down again on the daily. So I wonder whether we think that we've let go and we think it's a one-time only event. Maybe I'd say to that person, you might have to put it down over and over again. So this is still hard. I'm letting it go again, and starting over. But I think that idea around control is also really important, because sometimes we're holding on to things that we have no control over, which is then like doubly difficult and actually doesn't make any sense to do. If I think about COVID, I don't know whether you think you felt like this, but in COVID times, in the pandemic, I became acutely aware of I really don't control very much. And I thought I controlled a whole load.
Yeah.
And I suddenly thought, I can't control my ability to work right now. I can't control the circumstance. I can't control fully if I become unwell. I can't control I can't make it be that my children go to school, because they can't. There are so many things that were out of my control. And yet now we're back in non-pandemic times, I think I control everything again. So I wonder whether for people who are dealing with a long-term situation, it's not seeing it as a one-time only event.
Yeah.
And it's about then also saying, actually, if this person is in my life and it's tricky and they need to remain in my life, you know, for whatever reason, or this relationship is tricky, what's in my control? Well, what's in my control is my response to that. That's the only bit. Yeah. If it's a tricky situation, like a health situation or a painful grief or whatever, again, the only thing we can do is think about our response to that. I'm not sure that's about drumming something up or pretending to be something. It might just be about letting it go again. And also fixing on the things we can be grateful for as well. And I don't mean in that kind of, aren't we lucky, life is good. I don't mean that. I mean genuine. What can I stop and be grateful for? What is there that is good? As well as embracing. And I think it goes back to that earlier point. We're so binary about so many things. We're like, life is good, life is not good. Well, actually, life is good and life is hard all at the same time. Life is good and life is hard is like the most true thing. So I'm needing to let go and I'm still holding on can also be true.
I love that. What is something this year that you've had to, could you give like a specific example of something that you've had to actively reflect on, practice gratitude, and then let go of?
Yeah. Honestly, one of the things I've had to let go of this year is that my mum's poorly and she's going to continue to be poorly. She has Parkinson's disease, she has lots of other complicating factors. And I think one of the things I've said sometimes is I look at other people's situations and I think my mum's fading and I don't want that to be the case. But I've got to let go of an ideal of what I thought she would be like at this stage in her life, because it doesn't exist. And look at her and think, actually, she's here. She's still sweet mum. She's still naughty and cute and all of those things, and reframe it as gratitude for all the things I have had and also who she is. But if I keep thinking I want it to be like it was in a previous era, all I'm going to do is be constantly disappointed. But I know there's been a letting go of that and letting go of expectation of what I thought it might look like for her, for me, and choosing to engage with that and go, yeah, this isn't what anyone I would have planned, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's been something I've had to practice this year. And that's come about by me recognising, I think, that it doesn't look like I thought it might look.
Sure.
And I know parents get old and parents get ill, but when you are faced with that, it's still quite different.
Yeah.
So she's in the right order of things in the fact that she's an older lady, but it doesn't stop it from being, oh, I didn't want to see you deteriorate. Yeah, it's painful. So I think a helpful thing for me is making peace with letting go of what I thought that might look like. So that's definitely, to your point, Laura, not a one-time only event.
Yeah.
And I'll do that, I think, probably all the days of my life, I would imagine.
So I know on this podcast you want to give help for people in their life, in their work, and as leaders. Can you take that concept of letting go and kind of speak to each area and giving like a nugget or a tip for each
Of those areas of life? Okay, so first one was that leaders.
Sure.
So I think as a leader, we've had to let go of some goals, haven't we?
Yeah.
So that's like a leadership one. Sometimes you might have a goal at work or an ideal of how things are going to look, and you don't meet the goal, you don't meet the objective. And that has been another we could do a whole podcast on that conversation, but we don't always meet our goals and we don't always meet our objectives, and we have to let go.
Yeah.
We just have to let them go. A coach said to me recently, you have got like opposing goals or opposing things you're trying to get done. You can't do both of these things. What are you going to let go of? So we've had to think about, what am I letting go of in order to do that? So I think the in order language is quite good for a leader. What am I letting go of in order to be that? I'm letting go of being perfect in order to be vulnerable with my team. I'm letting go of this ideal in order to be present and so on. I'm letting go of perfectionism in order to let other people grow. So I think you can frame it quite positively, but I think the in order to could be quite helpful for a leader. Personal life letting go. I think that's about that gratitude piece, and I think it's about what we've just talked around. What does it look like for me to own the emotion, be honest about it, and put it down? I would practically say I write things down. Maybe you need to talk it out with a friend. Something that means you have a sense of a bit of closure, conversation. If you have faith, like praying about it, laying it down, whatever those acts might look like. But I think there's an act of, or you could write something down and rip it up. I'm all for that kind of behaviour, doing something and then ripping it up and throwing it away and saying, I've let that go now. This is a new page and a new chapter.
Yeah.
What was the other area I was supposed to do? Work,
life, and leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership life.
Okay, so if you're at work and you need to let something go, that's might be about a similar thing around the idea of this doesn't look like I thought it was going to look. And perhaps there it's about letting go of unrealistic expectations, which I think is a conversation for us to have at another time. We could table that and have it, because expectations has been the bane of my life on earth. It's probably my biggest ongoing lesson, round again and again. But rather than wishing it was an ideal that doesn't exist, what can you be like, actually, this is what I have in my workplace? And I guess, what's your agency to make things different? If you don't have the development that you want, how can you be that? If you don't have a culture of praise that you'd like, how can you begin to be that person? So I think maybe in the workplace, it's where do I have agency to let go of how I thought it might be and be part of the solution? And I think often we don't do anything because we think it's just little old me and I'm one person in a massive cog, and I'm literally saying all the time in workshops, if you start to make that change, somebody else sees what you do, and before you know it, you can see culture change. So let go and think about your agency, let go and think about gratitude, and let go in order to are probably some of the practical things that I would suggest.
So helpful.
Oh, well, hope so. I mean, we've got to practice what we preach, but hopefully that gives some frame of thought around it. And going back to the original point, as we ever go through a reflective process, I think there is always something of letting go. Even if the stuff you want to carry through to the next season, the stuff you need to leave behind for every new season, you can't take with you everything from that time. A new season's coming. If I try and imagine it to look like the previous one, I'm just holding on to stuff that's going to mean I can't enter the new season. last year's language is for last year, and we need new words for a new year. That's a rephrase of T.S. Eliot, but I think that's a good place to end it.
It's really good.
Good.